basically, you do want to make sure to... Trichinosis is actually killed at a pretty... It's bear meat, cooked in bear fat, dripped with bear fat.
In the silent wilderness, a creaking sound emerges. A man is frantically sawing a bone. He is in the uninhabited area of southern Alaska, a paradise where the black-tailed deer family has lived for generations. Today, an uninvited guest has arrived. His name is Steven Rinella, a full-time hunter who makes a living by hunting. He flew in with plans to stay for a few days, carrying supplies and a rifle. His first task is to set up a tent, as the nights here are cold with howling winds and temperatures dropping below zero. He curbs his urge to hunt immediately and patiently sets up his tent. After loading his rifle, he eagerly heads to the mountains. However, the rugged terrain and wind resistance quickly drain his energy. Soon, Steven feels tired and looks around for deer, but the forest seems devilish with only bizarre trees in sight. No animals visible. Frustrated, he continues climbing, enjoying the challenge of hunting on foot and exploring unknown areas, which gives him a strong sense of conquest. Each summit climb feels like a thrilling reward. Curious about what lies behind the mountain, he finds more mountains and a lake in the valley. Using his binoculars, he searches for wildlife near the lake but is disappointed by the absence of animals. Continuing his search, he eventually spots a deer through his binoculars. Seeing its robust figure, he knows it's a mature buck. Hormones surging, he is determined to hunt it. Quietly setting up his rifle, the buck senses danger and becomes alert. As Steven is about to shoot, the buck moves behind bushes. To avoid startling it, Steven doesn't shoot, but mimics a deer call which confuses the buck. It looks around, senses something off, and hides. Steven realizes waiting won't yield results and decides to take the initiative. Suddenly, a heavy rain disrupts his plans, forcing animals to hide and him to seek shelter. Disappointed but persistent, he keeps watching with his binoculars. After a while, he spots a deer again. As he sets up his rifle, fog rolls in, blocking his view. Feeling unwelcome by the mountain's spirit, he prays for better luck, but the rain intensifies, chilling his fingers. After sitting in the pouring rain for an hour, he realizes he won't succeed today and heads back to camp before dark, appearing exhausted. Back at camp, the tent flaps in the wind, indicating another cold night. The next day, after the rain, the air smells of earth, and a beautiful rainbow appears, signaling good luck. Soon he finds a deer about 1,600 yards away. He quickly approaches, and the deer remains nearby but senses danger. Steven jogs to a higher position, and the deer pauses, giving him enough time to set up his rifle and load it. After aiming, he fires, but the shot misses high, and the deer escapes over the ridge. Regretting the missed opportunity, he adjusts his mood, shoulders his rifle, and resumes his hunt. Unfortunately, he doesn't see any more deer and returns to camp, resigned. Before reaching the camp, the fog cleared again. So, he sat by the lake to see if any deer would come to drink. His judgment was right. Soon a buck appeared. Steven silently set up his rifle, and the cooperative buck stayed in place. It was struck down by a hot bullet. Steven laughed heartily, having successfully hunted. Now, he was ready to collect his prize. Upon closer inspection, he saw the buck was well fed and could yield 50 pounds of meat. However, as it was getting dark, with only an hour left before nightfall, Steven had no time to process it fully and had to bring it back to camp whole. First, he removed the organs, which decay fastest, and washed them with river water. Afterward, he dragged the deer back to camp, excited. At dawn, without hesitation, he began butchering the buck. He skinned it, and while cutting near the wound, he saw a 7mm round hole. He removed the bullet, then continued butchering the meat, which he sorted, packed, and loaded into his backpack. With fresh, organic meat secured, he was ready to return fully loaded. Next, he eagerly anticipated tasting the fresh meat. He selected 2 prime tenderloins, tenderized them with a stone, set up a gas stove, poured some oil in the pan, and when the oil was hot, added the tenderloins. The sizzling sound was highly anticipated. After a short wait, the meat was cooked. He picked it up with a knife, and its aroma was enticing. He took a bite. The meat was tender and delicious. This is why Steven chose this lifestyle. He loves the natural delicacies. He is a true food lover. For a taste of delicious deer meat, he would hunt in the deep mountains, get fresh ingredients, and satisfy his cravings on the spot. This happiness deeply fascinated him. The next day, he arrived in central Alaska, where towering snow-capped mountains are home to black bears. Indeed, today's target was a black bear. Even this formidable predator was just another item on Steven's menu. The bears mainly ate blueberries, fattening up with naturally fragrant bear meat, which is extremely delicious. He parked his car by the river, then entered the unknown area on an inflatable raft. Though the snow mountain seemed close, the distance was still vast. After a while, he picked up a dark piece of feces, a byproduct of the bears eating blueberries, and found several grayish hairs on a nearby tree. It seemed to be from a grizzly, not his target. He continued but soon found a large footprint, definitely from a grizzly. Steven did not want to encounter a grizzly. Its large size and aggressiveness could easily tear a person apart. He proceeded cautiously, walking up a stream and occasionally using his binoculars. Unexpectedly, he spotted a black bear, instantly exciting him. Seeing the well-fed bear, he couldn't control his excitement and began climbing towards the bear's location. However, the steep and uneven mountain path slowed him down. When he saw fresh berries, he knew he had entered the black bear's territory. He also saw some mountain goats active on the steep mountain tops, tough competitors. Although goat meat is also tasty, his target this time was the black bear. Farther up the mountain, he saw a moving black bear. Steven wasn't sure if it was the same one he had seen before. From his high vantage point, any careless approach could easily alert it. While hesitating, he suddenly saw another bear halfway up the mountain. Now, his target was clear. He quickly chased after it. After a strenuous climb to a high slope, he looked down and sure enough, the bear was still there. Although within shooting range, Steven didn't fire because the bear was on a steep cliff edge above a deep canyon. Retrieving its body if it fell could be uncertain. After hesitating, he decided to abandon the shot. Unexpectedly, the bear started descending the mountain, presenting a rare opportunity. Steven hurried downhill as the bear sped up, likely leading to a meeting point. Amidst this tense atmosphere, Steven kept his eyes on the target and found a higher vantage point just as the bear paused. A bullet then pierced the sky and hit the bear, causing it to run in pain. However, the shot was fatal, and the bear stumbled and rolled down. Steven sat down, calmed his excitement, then approached to confirm the bear was dead. With the sun setting, he faced a tough decision to leave the body overnight and return at dawn to process it. But he needed to remove the entrails to prevent bacteria growth. After parting with the bear, he returned to camp. The Northern Lights, one of the world's most beautiful sights, accompanied him back. The next day, he worried if the body was still there due to the many wild animals around. Seeing crows fly by unsettled him, as they often appear at kill sites. Steven sped up and, using his hands and feet, reached the site to find the bear still there. Relieved, he began butchering. The air was thick with the scent of blood, which could attract grizzly bears. Though the black bear primarily ate berries, it had accumulated a lot of fat. Steven appreciated these fats for their potential to be rendered into healthy and tasty cooking oil. He saw these fats as invaluable treasures not to be wasted. After packing the meat, he shouldered his load and carefully descended due to the weight. Drinking from a mountain spring and resting when tired, he returned to camp in 2 hours. Excited for the next part, he started a fire, took 2 chunks of fat, and sliced them like sushi. He then cut them smaller, placed them in a pot, and cooked them on low heat until the oil seeped out. He then added a slice of red meat from the thigh, cut into thin strips, and cooked it in the pot. As the oil bubbled with the rising temperature, he waited until the meat was cooked. Picking up a piece, its dripping oil whetted his appetite. Steven opened wide and savored the meat, chewing a few times as the flavor filled his mouth, thoroughly enjoying his hearty meal from the bear's fat, which could be rendered into top-quality animal oil. He soon arrived at a wetland in north-central Alaska, home to various birds. Due to the complex terrain, access was possible only by plane or boat, and Steven chose both. His friend Brant, an avian biologist conducting avian flu research in the area, had been waiting for him. After greetings, they set off. Their first task was to find a spot, as ducks have specific activity areas. They simply wandered around to see where ducks would be startled into flight. As they ventured deeper into the waters, the engine's roar spectacularly sent a flock of ducks flying. They chose a spot near the shore and began constructing a blind, using wire mesh to form a circle and decorating it with straw before positioning it near the lake. They then threw prepared duck decoys into the lake, attracting the naturally gregarious ducks. With the lake now dotted with decoys, they set up a wire mesh barrier in front and sat behind it, waiting quietly. After a while, ducks began to appear. When one duck came excitedly, Steven stood to shoot but forgot to disengage the safety, startling the duck away. This mishap embarrassed him, and for a while, no more ducks appeared. They concluded they were too close, so they moved the barrier further away. This strategy worked, and soon a duck glided down. Steven stood and fired, missing the first shot but hitting with the second. Brant sent his dog, which quickly retrieved the duck, marking Steven's first catch of the day, leaving him grinning. The first success soon led to a second, as another duck appeared. Steven shot accurately this time, and again the dog handled the retrieval. Several more ducks appeared, and Brant joined in, showing off his shooting skills. The excitement of hunting in this way filled both men. The gunshots echoed continuously in the wilderness, with the dog working hardest. Brant had a whistle that mimicked duck calls, continuously luring ducks. They began to play tricks, waiting for several ducks to gather before suddenly shooting, catching them off guard. After a while, they had bagged 8 ducks. As the day darkened, they were about to end the hunt when another duck flew in. Steven couldn't pass up the chance and shot again. Although he hit the target, it wasn't fatal. He ran to the shore to take another shot but missed, and he was out of bullets. He had to borrow one from his friend. By the time he reloaded, the duck had disappeared. They couldn't leave the wounded prey, so Brant brought the boat over, and they began searching for the duck but ultimately couldn't find it and had to give up. They packed up and started their return journey. The next day they set out early, but luck was not on their side. Shortly after, the boat's motor stopped. Brant tinkered with it, but couldn't restart it. They dismantled it to find the filter had water in it. After draining the water and reassembling it, the motor started again, and they continued. Eventually they reached their destination, set up their gear, and got busy until daylight. They had just sat down when 2 ducks flew by, one for each, but coincidentally, they both missed, possibly due to the cold numbing their hands. During the wait, Brant continuously mimicked duck calls. Soon, a wild duck eagerly approached. As 2 strong men stood up, the duck tried to fly higher to escape, but was unfortunately hit by a bullet. A large yellow dog quickly retrieved the prey, a fat, meaty mallard. The 2 men swiftly entered hunting mode, taking down many birds. Some birds narrowly escaped, but lone ducks often weren't as lucky. The large yellow dog tirelessly retrieved ducks, and with the excellent teamwork of the 2 men and the dog, their collection visibly grew. After a while, feeling they had hunted enough, they stopped, packed up their gear, and took the dozen ducks they had hunted back with them. Before enjoying their meal, they had important tasks. Brant needed to collect samples to check for avian flu. While he was busy, Steven started plucking feathers. After plucking, he gutted and cleaned the ducks in the river. They decided to cook 2 ducks simply by cutting a slit in the back, inserting the knife, and slicing along the spine to open the duck flat with brute force. Next, they made a cooking rack by inserting it into the ground and using willow branches to skewer the ducks, hanging them on the rack. Cooked over charcoal, the duck meat slowly became tender inside and crispy outside. Steven had to flip them to avoid burning. When Brant arrived, the ducks were nearly done. They began to taste the meat, finding the primitive cooking method surprisingly delicious. They nearly indulged themselves in the aromatic, delicious roast duck, laughing and thoroughly enjoying their meal. Poor large yellow dog, busy for 2 days, only got a little meat. This time he was in Northern California's mountainous region, home to Eurasian wild pigs that were becoming a nuisance. He had a friend running a ranch there, deeply affected by the wild pigs. They dug everywhere and even broke into barns. They seemed unstoppable. Finding wild pigs was easy. Just look near water sources, a daily destination for them. Equipped, they drove out. Known for their fierceness and cunning, hunting these pigs also came with great danger. His friend drove him to a forward cabin, and from there, he had to proceed on foot to avoid scaring the pigs with engine noise. Before setting out, he loaded his bullets and took all precautions. He walked slowly, always observing his surroundings and occasionally using binoculars. The forest had oak trees, a main food source for the pigs, indicating he was in an active pig area. Steven tried to find a water source from a high vantage point and eventually spotted a creek in the valley. Approaching it, he saw signs of wild pig damage. He identified a winding animal trail and followed it uphill. As he entered the forest, a noise ahead startled him. He crouched and looked, seeing leaves shaking in the bushes ahead. He held his breath and waited, but all went silent. It seemed the pig had run off, a typical outcome when a hunter is detected prematurely. Successful hunting requires seizing the initiative. Later, Steven saw no pigs, though he spotted a few deer. However, his target was wild pigs, so he did not disturb the deer. As it grew dark, he had to return to camp. The next morning, he set off again. Reaching a high ground, he used his binoculars but saw no target. He then wandered around, heading southeast for about 3 miles until he spotted something. Quickly using his binoculars again, he saw a wild pig running like a startled rabbit below, with another nearby. Steven observed their direction, suspecting they were heading to the sleeping spot he had found the day before. Confirming their pattern, he decided to take his time planning the next steps. However, by noon, he prepared to shoot a quail to satisfy his hunger. With his shooting skills, he could kill in one shot. After admiring the quail, he pocketed it, gathered some dry wood, and looked for tools at the campsite. He modified an oil drum into a stove, a key for forest fire prevention, as he couldn't risk burning down his friend's ranch. He then plucked the quail, tied it with a wire, and hung it over the drum to roast with charcoal. Half an hour later, a delicious aroma spread, and Steven eagerly tasted the quail. After eating, it was time to hunt the wild pigs. Despite their keen sense of smell, their poor vision meant he could approach carefully by watching the wind direction and possibly catch them sleeping. Getting closer, he smelled the pigs and soon saw them. He raised his rifle, aimed briefly, and fired decisively. Following the shot and the pig's scream as it fled, Steven calmly checked for blood traces, finding some on leaves. He followed the trail, seeing more blood along the way, and found the pig dead not far ahead. Delighted with his catch, he noted the pig's thick old razorback covered in thorns, looking quite formidable. After reflecting, he dragged the pig to a nearby creek for processing. First, he cut along its belly to remove the innards, then cut a branch and tied the pig's neck to it to create a makeshift sled, pulling the pig back to camp. It was a tough journey back, but he didn't rest, starting to butcher immediately. He made holes in the pig's legs, tied them with ropes, and used a heavy stone to stabilize the oil drum, hanging the pig in midair. He quickly skinned the pig and then cut the meat, starting with his favorite part, the tenderloin. Unlike domestic pigs, wild pigs have more lean meat due to their active lifestyle, but their thigh meat is still excellent white meat. After butchering, he looked forward to cooking. He shaped an old metal sheet into a bowl-like form, lit a fire on it, then placed the tenderloin on foil, adding an apple and an onion for a balanced meal, and carefully wrapped it before placing it on the charcoal and covering it with a metal plate weighed down by a stone. After half an hour, he eagerly checked it. Opening the foil, the delicious aroma was immediate. The meat, lean yet tender, melted in his mouth, tasting wonderfully good with the apple and onion. A true gourmet experience. After eating his fill, he would visit his friend's house to share the remaining pork. Today, Steven arrived in the southeastern mountains of Arizona, home to a type of deer known as the Coues white-tailed deer. These deer are small, with males weighing about 100 pounds. Their challenging nature attracts many hunters. The terrain here, mainly rolling hills, is also known as the Sky Islands. Due to the area's uniqueness, Steven enlisted the help of a local friend who knew where to find the deer. They set up binoculars on a high ground and began their vigil. After some time, a deer appeared in view, followed by another. Thanks to his friend's sharp eyesight, Steven hadn't spotted any. These deer are very elusive here. After briefing him, the friend drove away, leaving Steven to hunt alone. He moved to another hilltop and resumed observing. The view below was monotonous, and the small deer were hard to spot. Unfortunately, Steven had no luck and saw no deer by nightfall, reluctantly leaving to find a place to spend the night. The next day, before dawn, he set out again, changing his strategy to a mid-slope location with a view both up and down the hill, hoping for a better outcome. As the sun climbed, he had been watching for a long time without spotting a single deer. Deciding to move, he hadn't gone far when it began to rain. Fortunately, he had brought a raincoat, so he continued on. The weather here is unpredictable, and soon, the rain cleared. However, Steven hadn't found a new observation point yet. He crossed many obstacles and finally reached a high point, entering stealth mode again. Despite the thunder, his focus wasn't disturbed. Eventually, his efforts paid off, and he spotted deer, specifically pairs of Kuei's white-tailed deer. But Steven remained seated. A daunting canyon separated them, a bittersweet scenario. As dusk approached, he returned empty-handed again. 2 days of setbacks left him feeling very down, so he forced himself to sleep. The next morning, just as it was getting light, he started working again and soon found 4 white-tailed deer. However, they were moving, and approaching them hastily could scare them off. Steven tried to ascertain where they might settle for the night, but as the situation escalated, the rising sun made it impossible to continue watching the deer. He had to let fate take its course. As the day wore on, he could observe again, but was surprised to see 2 deer fighting intensely. Amused, Steven watched for a while before deciding it was time to take action. He needed to cross 2 canyons, the second resembling the entrance to hell, daunting and intimidating. As he walked, he suddenly stopped. A rattlesnake was eyeing him. Steven picked up a rock and killed it with a hard throw, planning to eat the snake if he couldn't catch a deer. He then approached the second canyon, which was very steep, requiring careful descent. An injury here would be disastrous. Focused, he overcame multiple obstacles and finally reached the valley floor. But his journey wasn't over. He had to climb the wall to the mountaintop. Fortunately, the gentle slope acted like stairs. After great effort, he emerged from the canyon, spotted 2 deer, but was downwind. Their keen sense of smell meant he couldn't catch up. With evening approaching, he decided to spend the night there. Dinner was, of course, snake meat. He cut the snake into pieces, boiled it in water, and added some chili peppers, which greatly enhanced the flavor. After a modest meal, he fell asleep. The next day, his 4th in the area, Steven resumed his work. Located in the deer's active region, he quickly spotted one, although it was at a distance. He decided to approach quietly. Not far along, he unexpectedly found a limping deer in the bushes, likely a loser from a buck fight. Steven approached, crouched, and aimed, intent on a humane, clean kill. The opportunity quickly arose, and he fired decisively. As he slowly approached, he saw the buck had already fallen and stopped breathing. Excited, Steven patted its belly. The young adult buck would likely have tender meat. He dragged the deer to an open area and then gutted it. Among the deer's organs, he found a lacy-like tissue, which he used to wrap the heart to keep it fresh. After butchering the deer, he proceeded to his favorite part of the process. He arranged some stones to form a stove and lit a fire inside. The dish for the day was an ancient recipe called deer heart corn cake. He took out the ingredients. The fat used for wrapping had dried a bit but still enveloped the heart well. He inserted a stick through it and placed it over the charcoal. After a while, the dripping animal fat sizzled on the fire. The external fat began to char, but the heart inside cooked gradually. Watching this, Steven's mouth watered. He patiently waited, then took out 2 prepared cakes. After a few more moments, feeling the time was right, he sliced open the outer layer to reveal the tender heart, steaming hot. He sliced the heart, carefully placed it on the cakes, and added some onions and small hot peppers for flavor. The key ingredient was a special fiery sauce. He rolled up the cake and took a big bite. The taste was excellent, and he fell deeply in love with this delicacy. After eating his fill, he packed up his trophies and started his return journey. Soon, he arrived in the Big Bend area of Texas, one of the world's most rugged places, home to a type of mountain goat considered one of the hardest animals to catch. Originally from North Africa, they were brought to the USA and have now settled in these mountains. Steven's plan was to find a safe shelter first, and he was in luck as he quickly found a natural cave. From the remains inside, it appeared someone had camped there before. With his rear secured, he packed his backpack, took his rifle, and went into work mode. As he walked, he used his binoculars to scan the area. Although he hadn't spotted any game yet, he knew where he was headed, the steep peak ahead. After a tremendous effort, he reached the summit and found some goat droppings, confirming he was in the right place. Steven began examining the ground traces, trying to figure out their direction of departure. Unfortunately, the tracks were too complex to discern a clear path, so he took out his binoculars to observe again. But all was silent, with no sign of animal life. This unexpectedly desolate wilderness was something he had never encountered before. As dusk fell, he reluctantly ended his hunting trip. The next day, as the sun rose, Steven once again embarked on his quest to find the mountain goats. Today, he finally spotted some wildlife, which lifted his spirits. He carefully climbed to the top of the mountain, only to make a surprising discovery: a large bloodstain on the rocks, likely from a bird of prey tearing apart its prey. After reflecting on this, he took out his binoculars for a long observation. His eyes grew weary over time, but he still saw no goats, indicating this method was ineffective. Feeling hungry, he remembered spotting some quails earlier, so he switched to a shotgun suitable for bird hunting and began searching the area. Soon he found one and shot it down, quickly retrieving the prey. He immediately set up a fire, took out a pan, and prepared sweet potatoes, onions, and peppers, using animal fat as oil. He stir-fried these side dishes first. Once ready, he added the whole quail, covered the pan, and patiently waited. After half an hour, he added some salt, chili, and pepper to enhance the flavor. When the quail was finally ready, it looked delicious. Adhering to his principle of saving the best for last, Steven started with the onions to stimulate his taste buds before slowly savoring the tender, perfectly cooked quail, giving it his highest praise. After a satisfying meal, he resumed his observation, and perhaps luck was turning, as he finally spotted a family of goats, a sight he had waited 2 days to see. Overwhelmed with emotion, Steven crouched and quietly approached the goats moving towards the valley. He realized he couldn't blindly follow them any longer as dusk approached, leaving him little time. Although they were still far away, missing this chance might mean not seeing the goats again tomorrow, so he considered taking a risk. However, after aiming for a long time, he decided against it as the sunlight faded too quickly, preventing a guaranteed humane kill. He didn't want the animal to suffer a painful death, if only wounded. Returning to his shelter, he endured a tough night. The following day, the weather worsened, with cold winds blowing, which was unfavorable for hunting. Surprisingly, after only a short observation, Steven spotted a young male goat, possibly ostracized from its group. He rushed towards it and, getting closer, began to crawl forward to avoid alerting the goat. However, just as he was strategizing his approach, the distance between them grew again. Steven was puzzled until he saw several other goats driving the one ahead away. Unintentionally, they disrupted his hunting. At this point, he decided to go all out, climbing directly to the mountaintop to see if he could encounter other goats. The path was treacherously steep. A misstep could be fatal. With cautious maneuvers, he safely reached the summit and used his binoculars to find a few goats moving towards a higher peak. The opportunity was right there. Steven crouched and aimed, but the high winds and the goats' fast movement made it impossible to find a shot. He had to reluctantly give up. The severe weather had a disastrous effect on his hunting. Though reluctant to admit it, he had to accept that his hunting trip was a complete failure. The plan to hunt mountain goats ended in failure. Unwilling to leave, Steven shifted his focus to another type of animal, the collared peccary, also known as the Javelina. Smaller in size, with the average male weighing about 50 kilograms, Javelinas are known for their toughness and ferocity. Given the proximity to the Mexican border, an area active with drug traffickers, he decided not to use firearms for safety reasons and opted for a traditional weapon, bow and arrow for hunting. After some searching, he found an excellent refuge, a natural cave indented in a rock wall adorned with some paintings indicating previous campers. However, after inspection, he felt the cave might collapse at any moment. For safety, he chose to set up a tent on stable ground instead. With his shelter secured, it was time to hunt. Although often called wild pigs, Javelinas are not true pigs. They have tusk-like sharp teeth, but their hoof prints resemble those of wild pigs. Steven soon found tracks, boosting his morale as it confirmed he was within the Javelina's active range. He moved to a high ground for a better vantage point. Although patient as the sun set, he had not spotted any game and had to return to camp for the night, settling for freeze-dried food. This sparked an idea in him, on how to prepare javelina meat. The next day, he returned early to the same lookout in hopes of seeing javelinas feeding. Unfortunately, thick fog obscured his view and disrupted his plans. Now he had to wander aimlessly, hoping for luck. Javelinas are most active in the early morning and at dusk, their feeding times, and they eat almost anything. While pondering, he noticed some fresh tracks on the ground. Following these, he came upon a rocky area with many caves, clearly showing signs of javelinas overnighting. And nearby, he found more evidence, including javelina bones. Proceeding further, aware of the javelina's poor vision but keen hearing, Steven moved slowly and quietly. Soon, he spotted a small puddle with fresh javelina tracks. Looking around, he saw nothing, so he moved to another high point. Suddenly, he thought he heard sounds like animals chewing. Following the noise, he spotted several javelinas feeding. Choosing to approach from downwind, Steven quietly got closer and began stringing his bow as the javelinas remained unaware. The distance between them gradually closed. Just as Steven was about to shoot, one javelina sensed danger, turned its sexy butt, and dashed away, leaving Steven frustrated by the missed opportunity. He followed slowly, hoping for another chance. Persistence paid off, and Steven finally got a face-to-face opportunity with a javelina. Seizing the moment, he drew his bow in one fluid motion and decisively released the arrow at the target. The wounded javelina bolted frantically. Steven reached where the javelina had stood, found the arrow with blood on it, and saw blood drops on the ground. He decided to lie down and let the javelina run for a while. After losing blood for over an hour, it would naturally succumb to its injuries. After enough time had passed, Steven got up and followed the blood trail. It led him far until he found the javelina lying on the ground, bleeding from the mouth, dead beyond doubt. Steven was ecstatic. He pried open the javelina's mouth, exposing its sharp tusks, which looked terrifying. The thought of having hunted such a fearsome beast with a bow and arrow filled him with deep pride. The javelina's claws were also peculiar, having two bendable nails, but even stranger was a scent gland on its back, which emits an unpleasant liquid when threatened, earning it the nickname skunk pig. After reflecting on this, it was time to process the javelina. He took out a small knife, slid open its belly, removed the organs, and then strapped it to his backpack, stepping happily onto the return journey. Next came the part he was most looking forward to. He planned to use an ancient indigenous American cooking method that he had only read about in books and was trying for the first time. He started a fire and found some porous lava rocks, placing them in the fire. He cut a prime piece of pork and the stomach from the prey, cleaned the stomach, and prepared it as a makeshift cooking pot. After everything was ready, he dug a hole in the ground and collected some cacti, arranging them around the rim of the hole. He placed the stomach filled with water into the hole and secured its edges with hooks nailed into the cacti to prevent it from falling out. He then sliced the meat and added it to the water. The crucial part of the cooking process followed. He poured the heated lava rocks into the stomach, causing the water to boil and cook the meat, an indigenous version of a hot pot. Watching the bubbling scene, he anticipated the outcome. As the water cooled, he added new rocks to maintain a high temperature. After about 15 minutes, he felt it was time. He removed the rocks and punched a few holes in the bottom of the stomach to drain the water. Steven tasted a piece of the meat. It was tender and delicious. The pure, unadulterated flavor fascinated him deeply. This hunting trip had ended perfectly. He recently arrived at the Alaska Peninsula to chase a legendary goat living at the Icecapped summit. These goats, rarely having any predators, have tender and delicious meat, attracting gourmet hunters willing to risk it all. In Alaska, non-residents can hunt goats only if they are licensed outfitters or direct relatives of local residents. Steven meets neither criterion, but luckily his brother Danny qualifies. They set off together, parking at the mountain base, and then heading into the mountains fully equipped. Due to Danny's busy schedule, they had only 2 days, so they would return on time regardless of the hunt's outcome. The steep mountain was covered in thick bushes. To save time, they planned their route uphill. While using binoculars, they unexpectedly spotted a goat at mid-altitude, a rare sight at such a low elevation. Steven used a more precise binocular to try to determine the goat's gender, aiming for a male. Unfortunately, the distance made it hard to discern. Deciding to get closer, they were cautious, knowing the treacherous path had claimed hunters annually. They overcame numerous obstacles and reached the base of the peak, but the real challenge began with moss-covered rocks making the ascent slippery. They leaned forward, slowed their pace, and carefully climbed to a safe area. Upon spotting the goat again, they realized it was a female, which had already noticed them and moved higher up. Their path was now covered with snow, slowing them down significantly. Looking up, they saw the goat at the summit, at least an hour away by their pace. After resting briefly, they continued climbing but saw no more goats in the next few hours as the sun set. They decided to camp outdoors and resume the hunt the next morning. Avoiding deep snowy areas, they walked through dense vegetation. After miles, they finally spotted a goat on a dangerous cliff. Using binoculars, they observed 4 goats, including a male. Reaching them required crossing 2 deep ravines. After planning, they moved, constantly checking the goats, which remained but seemed aware and tense. Preferring not to shoot without certainty and risk losing the goat over a cliff, they held their position, trying to ease the goat's suspicions. After a fruitless wait and no chance to get closer, they decided to circle around and approach from another direction. Reaching a new vantage point, they conducted a thorough search and spotted the goats again. Now sure of their target, they prepared to proceed lightly. After rearranging their equipment, the 2 resolutely headed up the mountain. Although aware of the difficulty of climbing snow-capped mountains, they only fully realized the challenge once they faced it. They soon became breathless from the climb, but the good news was they were close to the goats, which were still unaware of the danger. They saw a great opportunity to succeed. Steven was about to shoot when Danny urgently stopped him. He noticed something odd about the male goat. Although robust, its horns seemed too thin, more like those of a female. After closely observing and drawing on his years of hunting experience, Steven had to accept that they were all females. Disappointed by this realization, the 2 felt like crying after all their efforts led to this outcome. The goats, standing at the highest point, seemed to silently mock them. Steven wanted to shoot one in frustration, but wisdom told him to restrain himself. They had no choice but to pack up their equipment and start the return journey. Sometimes hunting is like this, not always smooth, but that's part of its allure. You never know the outcome until the last moment. Later, Steven traveled to southeastern Montana, home to mule deer 3 times the size of regular deer but with tastier meat. Having lived in Montana for 10 years, Steven knew exactly where to find this game. This time he wasn't alone, but teamed up with his brother Matt and friend Mosum. Matt had prepared a transport team of llamas, as the rugged mountain paths were impassable by vehicle and only llamas could carry the supplies. After a successful hunt, they would also transport the deer meat. After walking several miles, it got dark, and they camped overnight, spending a memorable night. The next morning, before dawn, they got up early and each chose a direction to start their hunting journey, leaving the llamas at the camp. Steven planned to walk along the ridge line, hoping to encounter deer. After searching, he noticed deer tracks everywhere in the snow and identified a mule deer trail, which he followed. Reaching a high point, he used his binoculars for a better view, and luckily spotted 2 mule deer. Steven controlled his excitement and set up his rifle. However, a doe was right in front of the buck, preventing him from shooting for fear of hitting her. Soon, as the doe walked away, Steven prepared to shoot, but the buck followed her, causing him to miss his chance again. Cursing under his breath, he continued to look for another opportunity. Suddenly, a magpie landed on the buck's back, creating a surreal and comical scene. More interestingly, a coyote appeared in the distance, also eyeing the mule deer. The alert buck sensed the unusual atmosphere, and all 3 forces unexpectedly converged, causing a sigh of amazement. The balance was quickly disrupted when the doe lost her composure and fled the scene. As Steven felt deflated and chilled from waiting in the snow for 20 minutes, his chance was ruined by the coyote. At that moment, he felt unprecedented anger, but with no other choice, he continued searching for his target. As luck would have it, Steven spotted 3 mule deer again. Just as he was about to act, a cold wind blew, and the buck disappeared. Steven guessed it might still be on the other side of the ridge. He decided to go around the side, hoping to catch it off guard. Despite the obstacles, He reached his destination and used his binoculars to spot the deer below. Steven approached slowly and found a good position, only to see 2 does. The buck was nowhere to be found. While moving and searching, his efforts paid off, and he spotted the buck again. However, perhaps his movements were too loud, and he scared the buck away, leaving only falling snowflakes where it had been. Frustrated by his wasted effort, and with darkness setting in, he had no chance to hunt again and had to return to camp. The next day, the weather worsened with falling snow and reduced visibility. Not ideal for hunting. However, embracing the challenge, Steven set out to find deer. Despite the difficulties posed by the heavy snow, it helped distinguish the freshness of tracks. Steven found some recent messy tracks and followed them to find several deer. He was downwind and in fog, allowing him to approach boldly. Getting closer, he slowly raised his rifle. The buck was unaware of the danger. Quickly, Steven took his shot. With the sound of the gun, the buck fell, stunning the nearby does. After calming his excitement, he returned to camp, brought a llama, and hurried to transport the deer before it froze. After a delay, the deer was covered in thick snow. Steven swiftly butchered the deer, removing the tarsal gland to avoid tainting the meat with its strange odor. Then, he sawed the bones and cut a tender piece from the loin, the most delicious part, perfect for immediate consumption. He then packed the meat and led the llama back, feeling exceptionally content, not just from the successful hunt, but also from the thrill of victory. Next, he eagerly anticipated cooking. He sliced the meat, melted snow in a pot for stewing, and prepared various vegetables by peeling and adding them to the pot with some spices, slowly stewing them into a rich soup. After some time, Matt also returned with a full load, drawn by the smell of the stew and eager to eat. As night fell, they gathered around the fire for a culinary feast. They celebrated the hunt with a stew made from the deer's loin, potatoes, carrots, and other vegetables, using snow for water, enjoying a delicious meal together. Steven came to southwestern Wisconsin, home to cottontail rabbits known for their tender and delicious meat. He also aimed to hunt deer and squirrels, planning to create a mixed meat feast. Steven visited a friend's farm, where generations have lived and managed the surrounding woodlands. Under careful management, the white-tailed deer population had grown, but they needed to be controlled each spring to prevent overpopulation. Steven was invited to join this effort. As preparations were made, 5 hunters entered the woods to drive the deer towards the waiting area, where Doug and Steven positioned themselves. Soon, a large group of deer burst out. Steven tried to shoot, but the deer were too fast and he missed his chance. All hopes were now on Doug. Suddenly, a group of deer dashed out, and Doug, caught off guard, was fortunate as 4 deer stopped briefly. After aiming, he fired. The shot scared the deer off, but Doug was confident he had hit one. He approached the spot and confirmed the kill to the others. They found the buck and decided to process it on the spot, quickly gutting and removing the innards before dragging it back, completing the first phase of their hunt. Next, they targeted cottontail rabbits, which became more active as the temperature rose. Switching to appropriate firearms and ammunition, they ventured into the wilderness where rabbit tracks littered the bushes. They decided to drive the rabbits out, a method that proved effective when Doug quickly spotted a rabbit. Unfortunately, he missed, amusing the group as they laughed at the spectacle. The hunting continued with continuous gunfire as everyone showcased their shooting skills. Steven stood out, nearly achieving a perfect shot rate, and they bagged 8 rabbits. The second phase was now complete, and they cleaned the rabbits by skinning and chopping the meat for storage. Steven, eager to try more game, set his sights on squirrels. Armed, he and Doug headed to a small woodland. Steven mimicked squirrel calls, hoping to lure them. After a wait, saw only cows pass by. They moved deeper and waited under a tree. Soon, a squirrel, attracted by the call, approached. Doug aimed and shot it down, earning praise from Steven as they collected their first squirrel of the day. Their luck continued as another squirrel appeared. Doug fired twice, successfully taking it down. With 2 squirrels, they had enough to meet their needs and returned home with their bounty. Steven processed the squirrel and then began to prepare his dish. First, he marinated the ingredients. He poured equal parts apple cider vinegar and water into a bucket, adding some spices, salt, and chopped onions. After stirring everything until well mixed, he placed the rabbit and squirrel meat in the mixture to marinate overnight. The next day, as the sun rose, Steven got busy. The meat was flavorful after marinating overnight. He first patted the meat dry, then coated it with flour and placed it in a hot frying pan. When he flipped it, he found it had turned golden brown, looking and smelling delicious. Steven enjoyed the cooking process immensely. After frying all the meat, he added some broth and finished with a high heat to thicken the sauce, enhancing the flavor. To cut through the richness, he prepared some onions. As the broth was nearly ready, he thickened it by crushing ginger snap cookies into crumbs and stirring them into the pot. At this point, the first dish was ready to serve. Next, he started on the second dish. Steven and Doug went to the barn where a deer was hanging. They quickly butchered it, and Steven picked several tender pieces from the hind legs, which he marinated with spices. He then took the meat outside to grill on a rack. While Steven was busy, others sat on the couch chatting and waiting. Their patience paid off with a delicious dinner arriving in stages. They eagerly tasted it, finding the flavor incredibly satisfying, a new and thrilling experience for them. The group exclaimed with delight and joyously devoured their meal together. This time, Steven came to southeastern Montana with his brother Matt, ready to hunt turkeys. During this season, turkeys are considered one of the most delicious foods. The two, leading their llamas, ventured into the wilderness, their laughter indicating their good spirits. However, the weather soon turned as snow began to fall, potentially impacting their hunting plans. They set up camp in an open area and split up to scout different directions with only an hour of daylight left. Their goal was not just to hunt, but to look for signs of turkey activity. They didn't see any turkeys, but stumbled upon several elks, which amused Steven, as he often couldn't find them when he actually wanted to hunt them. After voicing his frustration, he continued searching and suddenly stopped, hearing the sound of voracious eating. He cautiously approached the source of the noise, and upon entering a small grove he became extra careful, sensing he was near turkey activity. Hiding behind a stump, Steven used a call tool to mimic turkey sounds. Soon, a real turkey responded from the bushes. As he was about to raise his shotgun, a turkey head popped out, startling him. However, Steven remained calm and waited for the right moment. When the turkey moved into an open view, he decisively shot it. The turkey flapped a few times before dying, giving Steven a rush of exhilaration, as the hunt turned out to be unexpectedly smooth. Approaching the turkey, he admired its beautiful plumage, indicating it was a mature male. He couldn't help but admire his catch again before he headed back to camp, walking triumphantly like a victorious general. Back at camp, Matt shared his own experience. He had hidden in the bushes, mimicking turkey calls, which surprisingly attracted a coyote. They stared at each other, unsure of what to do next, until the coyote finally scampered off, cursing. Matt's story amused Steven, adding humor to their adventure. Next, they prepared dinner. Steven cut open the turkey, removed its gizzard, peeled off the tough skin, and prepared the edible parts. He then cut various organs, placed them together, added water to a pot, and began to simmer them on low heat. After 15 minutes, the organs were cooked, and Steven added some chili peppers for flavor. The two tasted it, enjoying the freshness. After their meal, they planned the next day's activities, deciding to hunt in different directions again. As night fell, they slept soundly. The next morning, they set out early. Steven returned to the previous day's spot, while Matt, following his intuition, headed south. Finding a high spot, Matt settled in and mimicked turkey calls while staying highly alert to distant sounds. His patience paid off as a turkey strutted over, emitting mating calls. Understanding the situation, Matt greeted it with a shot, and the turkey died on its mating journey. He approached, played with its feathers, removed the innards, and hid them under a tree before continuing his hunt. Meanwhile, Steven also spotted 2 turkeys. He lay down to avoid detection, knowing that the best way to hunt turkeys, given their poor vision but sharp hearing, is to let them come closer, increasing the chances of a successful hunt. Under his strategy, 2 turkeys were moving in his direction. Steven silently raised his gun, and just as the turkeys stopped, the gunshot shattered the silence. The tom turkey fell dead, and Steven slowly exhaled, feeling a pang of pity as he watched the hen run away. After she was out of sight, he approached, picked up the heavy turkey, and plucked the feathers from its belly. He made an incision, removed the innards into a bag, and then tied the turkey to his backpack to start the journey back. Returning to camp, he hung the turkey alongside the one from the previous day. After some time, Matt returned with 2 more turkeys, and both were thrilled with their successful hunt. They got straight to work, plucking the feathers from the turkeys. Afterward, Steven started a fire, anticipating the next part of their feast. He cut the fatty rear off the turkey, wrapped it in foil, and gently pounded it with a stone to tenderize the meat. He then seasoned it with chili powder, coated it with breadcrumbs, and fried it in oil until it was golden brown and crispy. Steven then cut a lemon into slices and arranged them, placing the fried turkey on top to infuse it with the citrus flavor. Dinner was ready, and they eagerly tasted it. The turkey was crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, and carried a refreshing hint of lemon. They enjoyed the meal immensely, finding themselves deeply indulged in the culinary delight. The turkey hunt had ended perfectly. Months later, Steven arrived in southeastern Arizona to pursue the king of the mountain, the mountain lion. He teamed up with 2 experienced lion hunters, Green and Mitchell, who had trained a pack of loyal and fierce hounds. For nearly 30 years, these 2 had been a nightmare for mountain lions. A large ranch in the area suffered yearly attacks from over a dozen lions, making it their job to protect the livestock. Despite their efforts, the ranch still lost about 50 cattle last year. Since Steven knew little about mountain lions, Green gave him a crash course, such as how to distinguish between dog and lion tracks. The lion's paw is wider, and the toes differ. After the lesson, they began looking for more signs. They soon spotted a clear footprint, which Green determined was made a day or 2 before. Nearby, they found a deer carcass, devoured except for the head, a grim reminder of the predator they were dealing with. Excited about the next day's hunt, Steven barely slept. At dawn, the hounds were ready to track the mountain lion and corner it against rocks or trees for the hunters to shoot with pistols, chosen for their portability and stopping power. The hunt began, and the dogs picked up the scent. The hunters followed slowly as signs of the lion's presence increased. The dogs, with their sensitive noses, could detect faint odors left on rocks. As more dogs began to bark, indicating frequent lion activity in the area, they faced a challenging task of discerning fresh tracks from the day before to determine the lion's escape route. This process could take from half an hour to half a day, requiring the lion hunters to be very patient. Fortunately, their luck held as the hounds formed a line and sprinted off, having secured a direction. Led by the lead dog, they chased after the lion's location. However, the good times didn't last. After climbing to a rocky peak, the dogs became confused. Realizing they shouldn't waste more time there, the hunters led the hounds deeper into the territory. After an afternoon of searching without any sightings, they reluctantly gave up the hunt. That night, Steven felt incredibly disappointed, lying in bed unable to sleep for a long time. Time flies, and 3 months later, Steven returned to the same location, ready to continue his previous challenge. He teamed up again with the 2 lion hunters, bringing along their most elite pack of hounds, each skilled in combat. After some searching, they spotted a set of fresh tracks, indicating an active mountain lion in the area, which greatly boosted their morale. The hunting dogs, particularly excited, sniffed ahead, but as time passed, they still had not found anything. Steven's spirits sank, worried about repeating past failures. However, Green soon shared some good news. The hound team had cornered a mountain lion. When Steven arrived, he realized it was a misunderstanding. The youngest hound had mistaken a young bear for a lion, which was somewhat amusing. They continued their search for a mountain lion in the volcanic terrain, where higher temperatures made scent tracking a challenge. When they reached a rocky summit, the dogs started barking again, indicating that a lion had spent the night there, but now the trail seemed to vanish. Steven, observing the challenging terrain they had traversed, felt the difficulty of the lion hunters' task. Despite their efforts, they hadn't even seen a lion, making it a tough hunt. With daylight dwindling, they reluctantly ended their day's journey. Although dissatisfied with the outcome, Steven appreciated the resilience shown, which was the greatest takeaway from this experience, along with a bit of self-consolation. After some rest, Steven traveled to the southern border of the United States, prepared to hunt American bison, a creature weighing over 1,000 pounds and the largest mammal in North America. Even wolves hesitate to provoke them. Here in the vast Sonoran Desert, characterized by sparse vegetation, cattle ranching thrived. The local ranch competed with the roaming bison herds, tolerating their presence but ensuring they remained within manageable limits. Today, Steven was permitted to hunt an adult bison, but unfamiliar with the terrain, he had to search blindly for signs of them. Currently, North America hosts about 500,000 bison, 94% of which live on or are owned by private lands. In this area, about 100 bison descended from 10 cows, and one bull released 35 years ago, roaming tens of thousands of acres. As Steven moved, he used his binoculars to scan the area. As the day grew hotter, he felt on the verge of dehydration. Jokingly, he thought he'd rather chase bison in swimwear due to the extreme heat, which seemed only suitable for birds patrolling the skies. Despite his complaints, his persistence paid off, and he finally spotted the bison. To avoid startling them, he immediately crouched down and set up a high-powered telescope for a closer look. The bison were now visible in more detail, but Steven still didn't make a move. Given the intense heat, the internal organs could expand before skinning, affecting the meat's quality. The wise approach was to watch the animals until the evening when the weather cooled. As the minutes and seconds painfully dragged on, Steven endured the heat while keeping his eyes fixed on the bison, afraid they might escape. Under this arduous and painful wait, 4 p.m. finally arrived, and it was time to act. He readied his weapon and selected a target, waiting for the bison to stand up to clearly distinguish one. Steven judged that when the shadows covered the herd, they would stand up and start feeding. After a short wait, his prediction proved correct. He put away his binoculars and took out his rifle, silently aiming. Soon he spotted a target, and without its knowledge, pulled the trigger. The bison fell instantly while the gunshot scared the others, causing them to scatter. Steven took a deep breath, calmed his excitement, and continued observing. These bison were aggressive and wild. A charge from them could trample one into mush. After waiting until the herd moved away from the site, Steven cautiously approached. The bison was a young female, much smaller than a bull but with tenderer meat that tasted better. This meat would be enough to fill his freezer. First, he cut the cow's neck to drain the blood. After a wait, he began his work, taking out a small knife to slowly peel off the hide from the ankles. After this step, he dismembered the limbs and hung the legs on a nearby tree. The meat was of excellent quality, lean and satisfying. Steven sped up, hanging each leg on the tree to cool them quickly, ensuring the meat's deliciousness. He then cut the loin and hump, his favorite parts. As the sun set, 3 hours since the hunt began, Steven still had much work left due to the bison's large size. The physical effort was draining, but he dared not stop for rest, as wild animals could be attracted by the smell of blood. After more busy work, he finally finished butchering the bison and was famished. He started a fire, cut a small piece of liver, and grilled it on the coals, turning it once. Soon, the liver was cooked, and Steven enjoyed its raw taste. After eating, he took out his sleeping bag and immediately fell asleep. The next day, refreshed, Steven woke up and prepared to transport the meat down the mountain. Since he couldn't do it alone, he called for help. The ranch owner brought some horses. They took the meat down, packed it into bags, and during this time, Steven cut the bison's tongue to use for a dish, and they split the head, a valuable resource. They packed everything and began their return journey. Back at the ranch, the owner showed Steven how to preserve the meat. They carefully sliced it thin, salted it, and let it dry in the sun for 2 to 3 days. The dry local climate was perfect for this process. They hung the meat high up, mainly to keep it away from dogs. Over time, the meat turned into jerky, which could be pounded into powder and mixed with water to make a tasty snack. After the hard work, it was time to relax with a dinner featuring grilled meat. They made many cuts in the beef, set up a grill, and slow roasted it over charcoal. Meanwhile, the farm's chef prepared a type of flatbread with bison tongue filling. Another favorite dish of Steven's was beef heart corn cakes, made by frying the heart with tomatoes, onions, and peppers, and eating it wrapped in cornbread. After their careful preparation, a rich dinner was ready. They gathered to enjoy the feast, everyone relishing the meal. It was a joyful evening. This time, he came to the South Island mountain ranges of New Zealand, prepared to hunt the elusive red deer. The South Island's mountains, characterized by glaciers, highlands, and rolling grasslands, are home to numerous wild animals. Among them, red deer, an introduced species from 19th century Europe, have proliferated due to the lack of natural predators. Thus, hunters are needed to control their numbers. Mathieu invited a local friend, Rémi, a guide who explained the area's terrain to Steven, and then drove him into the mountains. Along the way, Rémi mentioned another wild animal, the sheep, known for its equally delicious meat. The two planned to first hunt a lamb for food over the next few days. Reaching the high mountains, they saw a river in the valley with a few sheep nearby. Steven aimed to hit a lamb in the head, using his friend as a support. After aiming briefly, he shot at a brown lamb. They approached to check and found a well-sized lamb hit in the shoulder. They moved to an open area to gut it, removing the innards and tying it to the front of the car before deciding to continue up the mountain. It took some effort, but they finally reached the summit and unloaded their gear. His friend said goodbye and started back. With a few hours until dark, Steven quickly set up his tent, then skinned and packed the lamb meat to protect it from flies. Afterward, he went out to scout the area. As an outsider, he knew nothing about the place and needed more observation to plan properly for the next day. Night fell quickly, and though he saw nothing, he gained some understanding of the terrain. The next day, a thick fog suddenly reduced visibility. Steven went to the highest point of the mountain to wait for the weather to improve. Unfortunately, the fog only thickened over hours, forcing him to change his plans and wander around after descending in search of game. After some time, Steven heard some noises ahead but couldn't identify them. He approached slowly, but his footsteps startled whatever was there, causing it to run away. Frustrated but understanding that it was not a good day for hunting, he returned to camp to eat the lamb. He tied a leg to a tree and roasted it over an open fire. As the heat increased, the dripping fat looked delicious. Once the leg's surface was charred, he stopped, tore off a piece, sprinkled it with chili powder, and began to savor it. The lamb was incredibly tender, almost melting in his mouth. Steven marveled, considering it one of the best meats he had ever eaten. The next day, as the fog finally cleared, Steven admired the scenery while starting his quest for red deer. He traversed various terrains and continuously used his binoculars. Over the next few hours, he saw several deer, but no red deer. It wasn't until midday that he spotted a young male red deer. Energized, Steven planned his approach to get closer to the target. However, halfway there, he encountered a problem. The ridge's peak was crowded with deer watching him intently. A direct approach would easily startle them, alerting the red deer to the danger. Steven decided to observe their reactions, which unfortunately seemed agitated, with some deer even making warning sounds. At this point, he had no choice but to back off and take a completely different, longer route which would take hours, but it was his only option. Before starting, he filled a bottle with water from a stream and began the long, tiresome journey. Fortunately, Steven's luck was good today. By the time he arrived at the spot, the deer was still there, resting. He carefully observed and waited patiently for an opportunity while adjusting his rifle. As he hoped, the deer eventually stood up. Steven slowly raised his gun, and seeing the deer lift its head, he decisively fired. However, the shot seemed to miss. Startled, the deer bounced a few times, then stopped. Just as Steven was about to fire again, a scene unfolded that took him by surprise. A huge deer emerged from the bushes, capturing Steven's attention. He wanted to hunt this larger deer, but having already fired once, he needed to ensure the first deer would fall. While he waited, the surviving deer ran off to a farther place. Reluctantly, Steven watched them leave. He then went to check on the first deer and found it already down. Looking at its large antlers, Steven was impressed by the size of the animal he had defeated. After admiring it, he cut open the deer's belly, removed the organs, and cut a tender piece of loin meat. As it was getting dark, and there were no wild beasts in the area, he felt safe leaving the deer there to return for it the next day. Back at camp, it was completely dark. He started making dinner, slicing a pumpkin he had prepared earlier, adding the deer meat, and sprinkling some seasoning. He then added water and cooked it over the fire. After a while, dinner was ready. Lifting the lid, a delicious aroma spread, whetting his appetite. Steven eagerly tasted it. The deer meat was tender, the pumpkin sweet, and together, they enhanced each other's flavors. He thoroughly enjoyed his meal. The next day, he would return home with his prey, very satisfied with the hunt.